So welcome everyone to our latest PlantLab webinar. These webinars are sponsored by Zoom webinar. Thank you so much. And PlantLab itself is funded by the Ministry of Cultural Heritage in New Zealand. My name is Dr. Maggie Buxton. I'm the producer and the creator of PlantLab, which is a creative innovation hub and research project. And today we're going to be hearing a presentation from Dr. Tracey Benson, who is an international resident in the PlantLab project. She is someone who lives in Yarran, which is an island in the Brisbane, Queensland area. She'll tell us a little bit more about that. Tracey's going to be presenting to us today about her transdisciplinary practice and also sharing with us what she's been doing for PlantLab. So we're really excited to have you. Thank you so much, Tracey. You've come over for a few days to New Zealand to visit us in PlantLab, which is amazing. And this is going to be a record of your visit and also some of the work that you've been doing with us. So welcome. You and the spirits that you bring from your place are very welcome here. So,
oh, thank you so much, Maggie. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here. And yeah, I'm just really so excited to be a part of PlantLab. Just before we start, I just want to, acknowledge even though I'm in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I just want to acknowledge that I live and work in the lands and waters of the Jundaberi people, which is part of Kabi Gubbi Nation in southeast Queensland, as Maggie mentioned, and just like to acknowledge the caretaking that those people have done over those lands and waters for thousands of years. So I'm really excited to be here. Did you want me to jump to a presentation?
Jump straight in, yes. Share your screen and tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing. That'd be great.
Great. Okay. Hopefully the gods will be with me. Here we go. So I've called this talk Weaving Wetlands Connecting to the One Water because since I've moved to Yarran, Bribie Island, since January, I live very close to the wetlands, and that's been very influential in how my work's been emerging. So what I'd like to do is just sort of go through and give a little bit of context to my work and then show some examples of what I've been doing so I can share sort of the pathways that have led me to weaving the wetlands where I live. So as Maggie mentioned, I live on Yarran, Bribie Island, and it's a small sand island in Moreton Bay. So there's 3 sand islands in Moreton Bay, and I live on the smallest one and the one that's closest to the coast. It's 8 kilometres wide and 34 kilometres long, and 90% of the land is national park, and all the surrounding waters are marine protected zone. And Yarran in the Jundaberi language actually means crab or hunting ground because the passage between the mainland and the island is very rich with as a food source and provided food to Aboriginal people for thousands of years. It's also known as, this is not a great slide, it's also known as the dugong. So here's a map of the island, and the dugong, or manatee, as some people would be more familiar with that term, is the sea cow. And for the Kabi people, the island is representative of the sea cow, which is really beautiful. So the southern end is the snout, the coastal side is actually the snout, and then the island forms, you can see the snout there on the bottom right, and then the intestines and whatnot are sort of all there. Again, this is not a great slide. I also wanted to share, one of the things that I'm really drawn to is water and the narratives around water, and water is a connective element. And And here's some words from the Gubbi Gubbi language for water, which I collected just to show, you know, how many different types of words there are. And that sort of, for me, is very evocative of how water translates in many languages, and it has many ceremonial connections. And it's also takes many different forms. So, you know, it's a vapor, it's a frozen, it runs, it's steam. So I was just sort of thought it'd be nice to share that. And this is literally what is across the road from where I live, behind the house across the road. So I live very close to a wetland. And recently we had floods in the east coast of Australia, had some really big floods early this year. And this wetland flooded, but we're very fortunate that even though it flooded the road, there was not a lot of flooding of houses, but it was a real reminder that we live in a place which maybe humans shouldn't be living. And the swamp hens are certainly, you know, they're the creatures that belong here, along with the ibis and the snakes and the frogs. And I wanted to just, why I showed the images of the words of water earlier is because of how diverse the different kinds of water is just on the island. So this is the snout of the dugong. So this is the coastal side, which is Moreton Bay and which leads into the Pacific Ocean. So it's what you call a very small surf beach. And then we've got the wetland, and then we've got the passage which links the island to the mainland, and that's teeming with different vulnerable species. Also too, you know, as I mentioned earlier, so water is one element, but I'm very drawn to thinking about the elements and in both a grounded way and also as how they figure in my work, almost in a ceremonial sense. This is an image from a workshop a few years ago where we gathered and did a water ceremony as part of the workshop. And that workshop was in Canberra. You can tell it was in the middle of July. And that workshop was called From the Mountains to the Sea. And it was all about water and its journeying and its connection to us in its many forms. Also, I walk a lot in my practice, so I think the earth as ground is part of what plays in my practice around place and presence and a sensory element to my work. And I've got another piece of yarn in there. I did have some other trees, but maybe they'll come in soon. Also, air is another element, which for me is all about communion and energy and being. Here's the trees. Our breath is in exchange with the trees around us. And even though, you know, we are bounded as humans within our human body and we can't really occupy any other reality, I'm just really curious and open to how we might imagine or be in relationship with the world around us. So here are some 360 images from the Australian National Botanic Gardens for a show last year. And also fire. Fire is a cleansing energy, which, you know, now after, you know, sort of 2.5 years after the tragic fires in, hang on, I'll try and skip out of that. The fires that happened in Australia, the black summer fires. It's quite incredible to see the regrowth that's come, and some seeds don't actually germinate in the forests in the mainland of the Australian continent without fire. So I think it's like any of the elements, too much is not a good thing. So there's balance is important. So this is just a little bit of a snippet from a video work from around that time, I think 2020. And okay, and we're back to water. So I'll just jump through these slides, but basically I've been working with water as sort of the element that I'm most drawn to and the connecting element since about 2008. And this is a series of maps that they're backlit with solar lights, and they're estuarine waterways around Northern Australia where I spent a lot of time when I was growing up. And I just found so memory and childhood play a lot in my work as well. And this work sort of also emerged from my childhood memories living in Darwin, and you'd fly into Darwin and see these amazing serpentine rivers. And it was just a very evocative for me, a memory. So when I did this work, I was very much thinking about the land as it is and how it looks from an aerial view, but I was also linking that to my own memory connection and embodied experience of those places. And so the water work I've been doing has sort of concerned itself both with water as an element, as a storyteller, but also people's connection to water. And this was an installation I did in Turkey in collaboration with my partner, Martin Jury. It's called Cultural Strangers. And in this work, we made little origami boats out of maps. And really, this piece talked about journeying over water to places that we're unfamiliar or not friendly. And in many ways, it was an acknowledgement and a homage to the people that were travelling to the Australian mainland by boat and their perilous sort of journey and the consequences of that. And where we made this work, incidentally, was where there was forced migration in the early 1920s of a repatriation of the Greek community back to Greece from Turkey. So it seemed very resonant to sort of talk about some of these layers of story that were sort of removed from the history books because they were uncomfortable. And we actually found maps that we asked to photograph in a sort of a junk shop, and we weren't allowed to photograph them because they actually had the arrows pointing to where people were supposed to go back to. So this idea of belonging, unbelonging to where we live has also been another thread to the work that I've been doing. So the Words for Water then started to emerge very strongly as a project, probably from about 2013, and it was really a response to how I experienced the Murray River when I was doing some work with the Yorta Yorta community down there. And I basically crowdsourced and asked people what were their words for water, and came back with all of these amazing words. And it really made me realise that as a I guess a body of work, that there was a lot in here to explore and also collaborate with other people. So the earliest work was really came about with mapping the Murray from the source to the mouth. And so that piece actually resonates for another short video that I hope to show at the end of the talk. So it was a video piece. I also created an AR work for a conference, mixed reality conference. And basically that first piece really was a mapping of the journey of the river. And this is another iteration of that body of work. So I might just show you a little bit of this and then we'll jump. Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit pixelated. I'll just pause it there. Yeah, so basically this body of work has been built upon over time, and this was an early iteration, and then there was a later iteration which started to feature more of a detailed soundscape. So Aotearoa, the soundscape for that ended up being that soundtrack that you just heard, which was composed by Voodoo Child, a sound artist who now lives in Narn in Melbourne. And then there were other layers. There was a Waiata by Joe Tito, who I've collaborated with on and off over the years, who whakapapas to Pari Haka. And Leah Barclay, a sound composer, worked with her on that piece, and that was one layer. And then there was another layer where a performance artist, Juliana Preston, basically performed all of those words. So there was about 4 layers to that particular piece of work, which these are all on my website, and so I won't sort of go into a lot of detail, but this one goes for about 7 minutes. And come on, okay. So that was sort of, those works were very collaborative and really speaking about the river. And as I mentioned earlier, the other connection was the human relationship to water. And around 2016, I was building on this project and was looking at the Mary River, which is the river around Gympie, which is about 2 hours north of where I live now. And the Mary River is my grandmother's namesake, not literally, but my grandmother's name was Mary. And that set me on a new journey, which really started to look at ancestral waters and embodiment. And I really started to explore that through my patrilineal line back to Norway. So this is some of the work that was from an exhibition in 2018, where after I'd spent 3 months in Norway working on waters of the past. And this work, part of the reason I wanted to look at my patriarchal line was my ancestor was to come to Australia. So, and that's a fraught history. He was given free land, so very sort of, I guess, a problematic history, but he had his own story. He jumped ship in Melbourne, and interestingly, though, in those times, he was naturalised still as an Australian, but he was originally from Norway and was a merchant seaman. And so the 3 months I spent in Norway was very much about trying to learn about my ancestors and also build a thread between between my DNA and the waters of my ancestral and knowledge and connections to the past. And this also resulted in a number of collaborative pieces. This was a work where I collaborated with Aisling Muller. I made some runes while I was in Iceland, actually doing a residency, and I gave them to Aisling, who included them in a show that she'd had about the elements, where she asked people to donate things from nature. So I gave her the runes and I said to her, when I leave, can you give them back to the ocean? And so she created this beautiful performative piece where she gave them back to the ocean. And she also recited a poem by Goethe, The Spirit of Man. And then we built on that with another artist, Anne-Britt Raga, and we had layers of this translation of a performance of this piece of poetry. So we had myself speaking in Australian English. We had Aisling speaking in German, the original language of this piece, and Irish English, and we had Anne Britt speaking in Norwegian. And so that was quite a lovely work, which came out of those connections to the runes and the offering back to the sea. So I just wanted to jump forward a couple of years to another project, again using maps a lot, and it was called When the River Runs Dry. So in 2019, before we had the Black Summer bushfires, we had a massive fish kill on the Murray-Darling river system, and millions of fish died, as a result of the unhealthy state of the river. And I'll talk a little bit about, what that looks like a little bit further in the talk. So this was a series of printed images onto satin. So they were quite small, and they were featured at Gin and Dairy Gallery, which is a place where I've done a number of walking projects. So I just want to play a little bit of this. So after the fish kills, and then we had the fires in 2020, I created a piece called After the Fires, which was a collaborative work. Diane Booth had come to that workshop where I showed the image earlier of us all in ceremony to the water, and she is a sound healer, a sound healer, and had worked in orchestras as a violinist around the world. And when she came to Canberra, she created a spontaneous composition, which was a response to our gathering and to the moment, which was really beautiful. And in early 2020, she passed away. And after she passed away, I spoke to her partner and asked, would it be appropriate for me to honour her memory by creating a work that brought that composition into a video piece. So I will show a little bit of this if we've got it. So I'll just pause that there. So most of that footage was literally shot after the fires. We had a couple of huge storms, and the river, the Murrumbidgee River, which is the river, the is sort of close to Canberra, the top of the catchment, it hadn't flowed like at this rate that it was flowing for a very long time. And just to make the comment, though, that even though it was a wonderful thing that the river was flowing, when I shot this footage, it was palpable. It was very visceral, actually, the sense of the fire because of the churn in the water and the smell, also from the burnt wood and debris. So just a nice, I think, an acknowledgement of the work that Diane had done with us in Canberra. And this piece, there was another edit of the video that I did as a collaboration with a group called Old Media Orchestra, and this is at the National Film and Sound Archive, where we did a multi-screen, I guess, performance around using all different types of old projectors and things, and the After the Fires piece featured in that. And then I just sort of wanted to show a couple of pictures of some of the other projects I've done. So as I mentioned earlier about ground, one of the things that I do as part of my practice is walking workshops or walkshops. And I've been working with Ginninderra Conservation Corridor for the last couple of years, and we've organised walks. And the concept behind these walks, they're called Tree Creative, is to bring together people to walk, to be grounded. So we do meditation, mindfulness activity. There's usually other knowledge holders on the walks, conservation officers. Sometimes we've had elders, historians, and so there's always sort of lots to learn along the way, and participants quite often have things to share. And then there's a creative activity where people can actually play. So this is the top of the ridge with a beautiful big old red gum, and this is a group from one of last year's walks. And I showed earlier some of the images from the exhibition I had last year at the Botanic Gardens, which was called Talking to Trees. And basically the work from that was me seeking out some of the endangered species and documenting those on a map. So I spent a lot of time at the gardens just learning about what kind of plants were in the gardens and which plants are vulnerable. And I actually included this slide because it's actually, for me, resonates very much with where I've been today at A.H. Reid and the beautiful parkland there with the fern, huge massive ferns canopies in the Kauri forest. Now, don't know what's, yes, so this is some of the images that came from that work. Another collaboration that's been happening over the last 5 or 6 years is with Kuia Kaumata Mata Wharihoka at Parihaka in Taranaki, and that's been called the Silence Puanga. And basically we've worked together and co-created a number of works, including a video piece. And earlier this year I was over there for Puanga again, and we did some weaving. So I haven't added any slides there. And also there's another piece, Salix Wandering, which was a collaboration with 2 other artists, Faye Stevens, who's in the UK, and Joan Kelly, who lives in northern New South Wales. And this particular work, this is some still images, but we do have video. Yeah, so this particular work was about the 3 of us and our connection to willow or salix, because for Faye it's a benevolent species and one that's seen that contributes to the the health and economy of where she lives in Somerset. But for us in Australia, it's seen as an invasive species and a pest. So I think this work, and this is very much, I tend to work in ways where I collaborate with people, and those collaborations evolve and iterate. And so I think that Faye and Joan and I will probably evolve this work as well. And that actually brings me to what I'm doing right now. This piece will be presented at the ADA Symposium as a projection. So Weir again it draws on the Murray-Darling Basin, and for this project, which is a collaboration with Josiah Jordan, who I've worked with over the years, it was given funding from the Centre for Applied Water Science. This project, basically, we created a soundscape which incorporated DNA from the Murray cod and DNA from European carp. So the soundtrack to Weir is called Invasive, and it's a separate work. Also, one of the other audio layers to that piece is the history of the Murray-Darling from 1911 to 2022, and it's the history of flood, drought, and the locks and the weirs that were basically implemented along the length of the river. So, up until the early 1900s, from time immemorial, it was a trading route, and it was certainly a trading route when Europeans first came. It was a major trading route. And then water started to be seen more as a resource for irrigators and farmers. And so that began the process of creating the locks and the weirs. So I'm just going to show you a really short part of the video for that. Hopefully it'll work. It's just a minute long, and it's just a teaser because the actual work is 10 minutes long. Okay, that's that one. Okay, so so basically we're almost at the end, and I just wanted to show some slides of the Weaving Wetlands pieces that I've been working on. And this is not the piece that's actually in the show for PlantLab, but it's very much comes from the same body of work. So what I've been doing and working with Martin Jury with this is we've been collecting some of the wetland water and some of the plants that are from the wetlands, and we've created eco-dyed fabric for that. And the piece that I've put into the exhibition is a piece that is composed of some eco-dyed fabric that's been used canvas. So it was recycled canvas. And that's about me. So I'm going to jump over now back to this other screen and stop sharing.
Thank you, Tracey.
I hope that worked.
Yeah, no, it's great. So I guess in terms of the PlantLab space, the work that you've put in there is kind of, we see it as the beginning of a collaboration, essentially, because you've started the collaboration essentially, but with the work and also some online discussions. And the idea is that it's kind of the beginning of us working together here in Te Tai Tokerau with and building a bridge, in some kind of etheric bridge almost, between us and what's happening with you and Yarun, and exploring that not just in the physical canvas that you have in the space, which we see as kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily an exhibition, it's more of an innovation space. So it's kind of sitting in there ready to be kind of thought through or inspire the people in the space, right? And so the stage of it is really for us to see maybe how we can engage online in digital and code or signals or some way so that it's kind of building that bridge between us. And we spoke today about the fact that we think in terms of roads these days, but actually up until fairly recently, people actually communicated across water. So that the routes were actually water routes. They weren't physical routes that you drove on in cars or with horses or whatever, right? So it's thinking about those ways that we connect, and particularly in relation to plants, what are the commonalities? We also have had conversations about, linked to the work you spoke about earlier, about plants being out of place. So in one place they're very placed and very beloved, and in other places they're out of place and not wanted. And it also makes me think about people and how that relates to societies and stuff, and what's allowed in our ecologies and what isn't, and how that changes over time. So there's lots of rich discussions to be had. And I think the idea is that you're going to the ADA conference now, and then afterwards we're going to be in PlantLab for the next couple of weeks, so we can continue those discussions as we start our practice in the space as well. So at least we'll be conversing with you in residence, but perhaps in Yarun, as opposed to physically being here as you've been in the last few days.
Yeah, I totally. I think that's definitely what I'd like to see evolve between us. I mean, today when I did that little road trip up to the Heads, I noticed there was a couple of signs around about getting rid of wattle, and that sort of piqued my interest, because I think we were talking in the space about some of the plants that came in the big pots, and for me they are very similar to the plants that flourish in southeast Queensland, and even to sort of walk in the forest. We don't have kauri, but some of the ferns were very familiar. So I think that there's something definitely to explore with the plant conversation. And I'm definitely, I mean, I know that the possums are a real pest in New Zealand and they're protected in Australia, but the wattle did stand out to me, because for us, the wattle is sort of iconic, and there's so many different species of it, but I'd never realised that it was actually an invasive issue here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a number of those. I think that's kind of a richer discussion. I think so. I think in terms of the threads of your work, I think there's a strong thread around the elements and the relationship to Earth, and also collaboration, not just with fellow artists, but also indigeneity and indigenous cultures and people who are guardians and First Nation people and so forth, which I guess we have in common in terms of practice, and kind of a commitment to kind of relationship in terms of building work over time, so it becomes a collaborative research project, which I think PlantLab is kind of celebrating. It's as opposed to just let's make it work and present it for a gallery. It's how do we collaborate so the process itself becomes kind of as important as the work that's the outputs, and the outputs are many. I think in your case you often have many outputs. So there's rich areas for exploration, Tracey, and we really appreciate that you've that you've come on board and been a node in our Mad PlantLab experiment. So we may, in fact, do a few more of these little things as we go along. But for now, I just want to thank you very much, first of all, for coming over, visiting us, visiting the land. Thank you to for the work that you've contributed to PlantLab so far. And for anyone who wants to get in touch, the links to Tree Create and to you and so forth will be on the blog post that we do associated with this video. So if you go onto the RP World site, we'll have some details about that. So thanks again to our sponsors, Zoom webinar, but particularly Minister in Culture and Heritage, who are supporting these dialogues, in this case an international dialogue. And we look forward to engaging with you further, Tracey. So thank you again.
No, thank you very much, Maggie. It's been wonderful and looking forward to what unfolds.